welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is honestly a deeply complicated and sometimes really painful gift. Now, you might actually know the exact agonizing reality I'm talking about here. It's that feeling of walking into a room and just instantly reading the unspoken dynamics before anyone even opens their mouth. It's like you watch a relationship unfold, or maybe a business dynamic, and you know exactly how and why the whole thing is going to collapse literally months before it happens. It's an absolutely incredible ability, but it comes with a deeply hidden and honestly incredibly dangerous psychological trap.
So let me ask you to be brutally honest with yourself for just a second. Think back to the last time you correctly predicted someone's downfall. When they finally crashed, exactly like you said they would, what was your immediate internal reaction? Did you feel genuine compassion for their pain? Or did you feel a quiet, maybe slightly smug sense of superiority because, well, you were right? Think about it. Because if you felt even a little thrill of superiority, you really need to understand the trap you've just stepped into.
Okay, let's get into Section 1, the burden of perception. So before we can really unpack this trap, we gotta look at the heavy psychological toll of seeing what other people actively choose to ignore. And why this gift, well, it often feels way more like a curse. You see, the legendary psychologist Carl Jung actually had a clinical name for your ability to just instantly read the hidden truth in a room. He called it differentiated perception. Basically, it's this extraordinary, super rare form of unconscious pattern recognition. You aren't just taking wild guesses here. Your brain is literally processing microexpressions, historical patterns, and behaviors way faster than your conscious thought can even keep up with. But knowing the truth, that's really only half the battle. The other half of the battle is dealing with this incredibly painful cycle that highly perceptive people are forced to endure. It goes like this. You see a disaster coming from a mile away, so you naturally try to warn people. But, shocker, they don't thank you. Instead, they call you negative, they accuse you of projecting your own issues onto them, they basically attack you just for exposing the very truths that they've all collectively agreed to ignore. And let me tell you, after years of facing this constant dismissal and gaslighting from folks who just aren't conscious of it, it is exhausting. And worse, it sets the perfect stage for a massive psychological misstep.
Which brings us to Section 2, the profit complex. So after years of being targeted, rejected, and basically being told you're crazy for seeing what is right in front of everyone's faces, highly perceptive people often make a pretty fatal mistake. Look, when the world constantly rejects your completely accurate insights, it is entirely understandable to double down, right? But this leads to the profit complex. It's this devastating psychological trap where your accurate perception actually curdles into arrogance. You shift from being this curious witness to becoming a rigid judge. You start to become convinced that you're uniquely clear-eyed in a world full of the willfully blind. So what happens? You stop offering your insights as possibilities, and you start delivering them as absolute, unyielding pronouncement.
All right, let's look at Section 3, the fall of Nietzsche. To really grasp how dangerous this is, we need to look at how this trap literally breaks genuinely brilliant people. The absolutely crucial point to remember here is that just seeing other people's shadows does not make you superior to them. And actually believing that it does, well, that's what Jung clinically referred to as psychic inflation. This happens when your ego becomes completely identified with a power far greater than itself. You end up mistaking this raw perceptive power for genuine spiritual development. Basically, you start to believe that just because you can spot the flaws in everyone else, you're somehow magically floating above them. Jung spent years studying folks with these exact gifts, and he frequently pointed to the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche as the ultimate cautionary tale here. Now, Nietzsche possessed some genuinely rare, differentiated perception. He could see through the social and religious facades of his time with terrifying accuracy. But here is the real tragedy. He never actually integrated his own shadow. His absolute certainty about the falsehood of the world around him just wasn't matched with honesty about his own falsehoods. And because of that, he wielded his perception like a weapon. He completely withdrew from humanity just to sit back and judge it from afar. Ultimately, he didn't transform the world at all. Instead, he just collapsed into grandiosity and suffered a complete psychological breakdown.
And honestly, just think about the absolute irony of the modern internet for a second. We have literally millions of people online labeling themselves as empaths and truth tellers, right? Yet they use these supposedly elevated spiritual gifts to just relentlessly diagnose and destroy total strangers in the comment section of, like, a baking video. It's wild. The truth is, if your quote-unquote higher frequency just makes you entirely intolerable to be around, you haven't reached enlightenment. You've really just weaponized your own ego. let's shift gears to Section 4, conscious humility.
We really need to step away from that kind of cynical isolation and look at a grounded, actual solution. Just contrast Nietzsche's total collapse with the 14th century mystic Meister Eckhart. Eckhart possessed the exact same extraordinary capacity to perceive realities way beyond the consensus of his time. But rather than just sitting back and judging humanity, he held on to his gifts with this deep, conscious humility. He channeled his profound perception into compassionate service. He recognized that superior insight isn't some shiny achievement to go around flaunting. It's actually a really heavy responsibility to carry.
So to escape the prophet complex yourself, you have to guide your mind through a slightly brutal but absolutely necessary psychological distinction. Number 1, your perception is not the same thing as your judgment. Number 2, your judgment is definitely not the same thing as the absolute truth. And number 3, perception is really just data. That's all it is, just data. Real wisdom is knowing exactly what to do with that data.
And gaining that true wisdom requires absolute humility, mainly because you have to acknowledge the limits of your own data. Sure, you might clearly see this toxic pattern that someone is acting out, but you don't know their full story. You just can't see the hidden wounds they carry that actually created that pattern in the first place. Plus, you are entirely blind to the invisible progress they've already made. Simply put, seeing a flaw does not mean you understand the entire person. Moving on to our final phase, Section 5, Becoming the Bridge. This is the part where you actually learn how to use your gift properly. You absolutely must commit to relentless shadow work. I mean, you have to accept that you, yes, you, are capable of the exact same manipulation, the exact same selfishness, and the exact same blindness that you can so easily spot in everybody else. The plain truth is, the only person who can see clearly without distortion is the person who has been brutally, uncomfortably honest about the distortions in their own lens. Which brings us to what is basically the ultimate test of your psychological maturity. When you see the unconscious darkness in the people around you, what do you do with it? Do you use it as a reason to isolate yourself and just judge them from afar? Or do you use it as a mirror to turn around and examine your own shadow? Because actively acknowledging your own capacity for darkness and arrogance, that is the very first vital step to actually dismantling it. Now, when you finally do that deep work, you reach the highest level of integration. A truly integrated, perceptive person, they stop needing the whole world to acknowledge their clarity. You don't have to dim your light to make unconscious people comfortable. Absolutely not. But crucially, you also don't wield your light as a weapon against the people who are still stumbling around in the dark. You simply step down from the pedestal. At that point, your perception stops being a weapon, and it finally becomes a tool for genuine human connection.
You really do have an extraordinary gift, but at the end of the day, it is entirely up to you how you're going to carry it. So I want to wrap up this explainer by leaving you with one final, deeply provocative thought to chew on. Moving forward, will you use your clarity to build a pedestal to stand above others, or will you use it to build a bridge to connect with them? The choice is entirely yours.